Hey everybody, welcome back to Galaxy Brain, and I'm hyped because this is our first new game that we're doing in Galaxy Brain. We're doing World of Warcraft, we're doing some PvP. I have Tiqqle with me, who is a pro Enhancement Shaman. Enhancement Shaman has always been a class that's been very close to my heart over the years, so why wouldn't I want to kick off World of Warcraft Galaxy Brain with the #2 Pandarian Enhancement Shaman in the world. Tiqqle, how's it going?
It's going good. It's going good. I've been enjoying the panda since my chat tricked me into becoming one, so that's been good. But yeah, everything's going pretty well. Pretty well.
How did that come about? Like, you just ran a contest, right? And like the prize was getting to make you into a Pandarian.
Yeah, so like every month or so, I just kind of open it up to the chat and I say, "Hey guys, like I want to change it up because there's always a best of certain of every class
Of course,
in the game
yeah.
for PvP, right? And often it's the same thing. So like for a shaman, it's always been orc shaman's the best
Right.
because you have stun reduction and all this stuff. But a lot of people don't want to necessarily be the best because that's what you're looking at all day, all the time. So I always like changing it up a little bit so people can feel comfortable with like, hey, you can still achieve high ratings if you're not the best. So so originally I started Shadowlands as a Vulpurian, the little fox, and then this time around the chat kind of bullied me. We usually do voting, but then all of a sudden the chat one day just decided to just spring upon me that everyone was just going to spam panda in the chat until I did it. And so that's kind of how it went down. And then I changed to it, and even my teammates make fun of me, but frankly it's like still, I mean, like everything's going fine. It's not that big of a deal.
Hey,
it's a nice way to show people that, hey, you can still have fun and play the race you want. You don't have to just be kind of pigeonholed into just orc or whatever the race is.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for min-maxing, but there's also something to be said for playing what you want. And I think playing Enhancement Shaman in PvP is kind of, to a certain extent, playing what you want rather than min-maxing, the PvP potential anyway. But I think that's great. I think it is good to kind of show people you can achieve high ranks with a class, even if it isn't like the top meta class at the moment and all that. But
yeah,
let's get into a little bit of your background here. So obviously you play a lot of World of Warcraft. You're very into PvP there. But what's sort of your gaming background? How did you get to this point?
Yeah, so I started making like content specifically for World of Warcraft, or specifically for just at the time it was Elemental Shaman back in Legion,
right?
And it was from that point that I started to expand. At the end of I was only Elemental Shaman, and in Legion, which is the ranged variety of Shaman, and then from there I went into Enhancement Shaman and Elemental Shaman when Battle for Azeroth came out, and then that's where I got my first Glad title playing between those specs. And then from there, I expanded to Restoration. So I started playing all the Shaman specs and kind of making content for all of them throughout BFA. And then I got a few more Glad achievements playing the different specs. So by the time I got into Shadowlands, it was kind of time to go back to Enhance, which is where I started in Battle for Azeroth, especially with the amount of rework that went into Enhancement Shaman and Shadowlands this time around. I wanted to really, and it's one of the reasons why I was an Elemental Shaman, making PvP content back in Legion, was that my friend said, don't be an Elemental Shaman, they're bad. Or don't play Enhancement Shaman, they're bad. And those are the reasons why I stuck to those classes. It's not kind of the typical like rogue mage everyone knows is like always being king of the court, but I wanted to stick to Shaman and let them know that, hey, like we can do well, and there's people that will help you do well. And so that's kind of my MO with the content that I try to make and try to help people out. So
that's great. I feel like we have similar interests when it comes to gaming, is that if something becomes meta, that immediately just like tells our brains to be like, okay, well, I don't want to play that. I want to make sure I'm doing something else, like something non-meta, Yeah. But that's awesome. So you've got an amazing view behind you as well, by the way. Is that just like is that actually like a window behind you with some curtains in front of it, or what is that?
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's just a curtain. I've kind of been moving a little bit place to place because of the COVID situation. So I've been fortunate enough to land here for the next month.
Nice.
Before I have to figure out where I'm going to be next, but it's been good. Yeah, it's a nice view.
Got a sick view for sure. All right.
Yeah, sometimes I joke that it's a green screen, but
that's what I was wondering. I was like, is that like a background you put up intentionally? But that's great.
Yeah.
But so we're going to do 3 games today, and we're going to go through them and kind of break them down. The point of this show, the point of Galaxy Brain, is to get into the mentality of the best players when they're playing the games. So it's sort of a deep dive, not only into this is good to do in X situation, but also like what is a player thinking during these situations as well. So yeah, 3 games of Arena, a little bit shorter than TFT, so we can fit a couple more games into the time slot. So I'm hyped about that. You ready to get into game number 1?
I'm ready to go.
All right, let's do it. All right, so here we are in game number 1. You're going up against Hunter, Priest, Paladin. Marksmanship, discipline, ret, as you would expect, although there's a lot of holy paladins in there as well. But kind of set the stage for us in this one.
Yep, thanks. So I'm playing Turbo Cleave, which is probably the most popular Enhancement Shaman 3v3 comp. It's an Enhancement Shaman, Arms Warrior, and Healer. Now, I'm playing with a Mistweaver, which is not the meta. Mistweavers are not known for being good right now. They're actually known for being bad, very bad right now. There are only a few that are even above 2,400 right now. But this comp is all about a very, like, the most aggressive play style possible. So what you're going to see from us is we're going to be going in and we're going to try to be setting up kills through stuns very quickly. We want to get in there and get momentum.
Okay.
Now we want to go on the Marksman Hunter. And if you pause it for just 1 second, we want to go on the Marksman Hunter here. But frankly, he is so mobile that we will have to switch targets depending on what we can hit. And so and you can see, you know, some weak auras on my screen indicating my cooldowns, which are my Doom Winds legendary and my Bloodlust. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be blitzing whatever we can about every 30 seconds, which is on the warrior stun. So at this time, I need to be ready to just pump as much damage as possible. But at the same time, I know they're going to try to CC my healer, so I'm going to have to bank as much healing as I can so that when my healer goes into CC, I can either heal myself or my teammates as needed. So if you go ahead from here, you'll see us, you know, try to look around to see where we're going to kind of pick our target. We want to go this hunter, so we kind of round up to him. We stun him immediately, and we start pumping. Now, you can see right here, they already popped my warrior, who had to pop his main defensive cooldowns, and they get a trap on my healer. So they reverse the go by just using positioning, and that's what this team excels at, is being slippery. So again, you can see us kind of trying to go after this hunter, but he's just running and rooting. And so what we end up having to do is we have to switch targets. We have to get momentum, and if we can't hit a target, we're doing 0 damage. So we quickly are turning to hit the Ret Paladin. Now, Ret Paladins are known for one-shots right now. So here we can see my healer got a quick leg sweep. And if you pause it really quickly here, he got a leg sweep, on, which is a 5-second stun on the disc and the Ret Paladin, which is a great kind of switch there. But frankly, the Ret Paladin still has his Divine Shield, has a lot of defensives to be able to use to keep himself alive. So we know we have to get through a lot. So it's going to be these times where we see them either make a positioning error, or we can say, oh, we have cooldowns and we have to put them into a stun. That's where we know we need to get cooldowns out of them.
So a couple things I wanted to ask you with that. 2 things. So you mentioned the warrior CC cooldown being at 30 seconds. That does line up with Sundering as well, doesn't it? Is that that's a little bit longer? What, like, is it like, I'm trying to remember, 45? 40?
Yeah, 40. So it's very close. Yeah.
Okay, so you can kind of line it up loosely with that as well. The other thing I really that stood out to me when I watched this game before we are shooting this now is that you don't use a ton of Maelstrom for attacking. You use it mostly for healing, which makes sense. But that's something that kind of surprised me, because when you talk about bursting, I guess my question is, how do you make the distinction to decide to use something like a lightning bolt or use something like a heal instead? Given the situation, there's the obvious stuff, but I feel like I can get a more nuanced answer out of you.
No, this is great, because a lot of people do ask me, like, hey, I'm going or hey, like I get killed when my healer goes into a CC very quickly. How do you manage that? And that's actually I think the most important thing for the Enhancement Shaman playstyle right now. It's one thing to do your damage, but the most powerful thing of an Enhancement Shaman right now, to me, is our ability to keep ourselves alive. And so for me, what I do, and we're kind of overcompensating because we run a Mistweaver. He doesn't have a bubble, as an, I made a mistake, I can bubble out of this if he, positioning error. So we really can't make mistakes. But
I see. Okay.
I generally do not use Lightning Bolt. I try to not use it, unless the only time I will use Lightning Bolt is if they don't have offensive cooldowns and my healers, I know my healer is not in risk of being in crowd control. So then I'll use one, but I'll never go down to 0 Maelstrom unless it's from healing. So I will bank up to all 10 stacks of Maelstrom weapon. because I know that if they get my healer and CC, it's up to me and the warrior to keep ourselves going, especially if we don't have, you know, the gladiator medallion trinket.
Right.
So yeah. So to answer your question, really, it's I don't like using lightning bolt, and the reality is, like, one lightning bolt which will do about 5k damage, will not make or break the game. And and the game is in a place now where cooldowns have to be responded to with cooldowns. So in reality, just a little bit more overall damage will not turn the tide of battle. But my self heals can heal me for up to 15, 18k, which is about a 30% of my health.
Yeah.
That will keep me alive through a crowd control that basically, you know, could lead to our demise. And you'll see me here coming up. My healer will get into, you know, and we can kind of hit it from, you can kind of go from here.
Sure.
You'll see, you know, the hunter's always trying to CC my healer. And again, we get the dome out of the disc grease, which is a huge defensive. And you can see we're kind of positioning back towards my healer. My healer gets trapped into a stun. That's 11 seconds of CC. And I'm communicating, hey, we're okay. We're fine. You can see I'm using heals to heal my warrior up. And I'm able to kind of keep him going while my healer's in crowd control. And that's one thing that Enhanced Shaman can do better than almost any other class right now, is sustain the team during a crowd control. And that's one of the reasons you would not think that, knowing that, you know, Enhance is such like a get in there and start fighting, but it's in a pretty good spot. So now what you're going to see here is we now made a switch to the Ret Paladin, and you're going to see we just do overwhelming damage and just burst him down.
Yeah.
And the reason that happened was we made the switch because we can't hit the hunter. He's just kiting too much. The priest we could go, but the Ret Paladin can heal the disc. So there wasn't really too much for us to do other than to go on the Ret. And frankly, the Ret's a good target for us to just pummel, because if he wants to keep himself alive, he has to use some of you know, his builder spenders on healing himself as well. So this was just a kind of a quick switching game around, but it shows that, like, Turbo has so much pressure as long as the healer's not in crowd control. As soon as the healer's in crowd control, we go on defense. I start healing using only the instant cast heals, and my warrior, who has a huge toolkit, will kind of, you know, keep me alive too if needed.
Okay, so one of the questions I was going to ask you too is, when we looked at that damage screen on the breakdown, you obviously did the most. It's going to vary round to round, but what's the percentage burden breakdown usually between the warrior and the shaman in that comp?
Yeah, usually it's really one of two ways. Usually I can top damage by a bit, and that's if I'm able to maintain being offensive, and that's usually against a lot of caster comps or caster melee comps. What will happen is, if we go against a double melee comp, they will focus me so much that I will need to do two things that are, well, really mostly one thing that I think is not really thought of as a very common play style for Enhancement Shaman.
Okay.
But if I go against, like, let's say I go against a Ret Paladin and a Frost DK, or a Ret Paladin warrior team specifically, that's a good example. If they pop all their offensive cooldowns and I'm not in a stun, I can kite better than a lot of other classes, a lot of other melee classes. So what I do is, if they pop those things and I'm not in a stun, I will start to kite. And I will start to run away from them, and they have a choice. They can either try to chase me with my warrior hitting their behinds nonstop, or they can just turn and hit the warrior. And what I want them to do is, I want them to turn to hit my warrior, because as soon as they do that, then I can hex one of them, and then we can kind of re-engage in the fight. So this kiting pattern that I'll do against double melee, that is not going to make me top damage at all. But that will allow me to kind of decrease their momentum and then wait for my cooldowns to be up to be able to kind of hit them again. So
that's one of the things. Question. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just gonna say that's basically the answer to your question, though. Is like, really, depends on the comp, but it's always great to be top of the meters, but you're not always going to be there.
Well, that's kind of the hybrid classes at its best, right? Is that you're providing a lot of utility. The damage is there, of course, and it can be good, but really it's more that you're able to absorb spells with things like Grounding Totem, so you're able to slow people. You've got Capacitor Totem for stun, you've got Sundering for stun, you've got Hex, you've got Wind Shear, you've just got so much utility, and you add the instant heals in there as well with Healing Surge, and you kind of have a total package. You're fragile as an Enhancement Shaman, but you do have a lot of ways to mitigate that fragility to a certain extent. But let's talk more about that as we go into the second game. You ready to go?
Yep. Right. Ready to go. Let's go.
Cool. And here we are in game number 2. This is going to be against a Mage, Holy Paladin, Destruction Warlock, Fire Mage, of course. Do you see many Frost Mages? I feel like I see some in Arena, but really rarely.
Yeah, really rarely. I think when there was a round of adjustments, like a nerfs, that some frost mages came out of the came out from hiding, but largely no,
Yeah.
largely no. Still not seeing them yet. It's fun to see class diversity, but mainly still fire mages. And in this game, what we're doing, and when we're going in here, we're basically saying, listen, guys, the only way we can lose is if the fire mage uses combustion, or the dark and or the destruction warlock uses a dark soul. Like, that's it. We can't lose
easy.
otherwise.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so that's the
Nothing to
mentality we're
worry
going
about.
in with. Yeah, and we know that we are the blender that is turbo, so we know we can kind of have good consistent pressure. So here we need to be on the lookout for that. And once I see those abilities pop off, like if you pause it right now, if you look at the omnibar in the top left, it's lit up with combustion was popped, everything I just said was popped.
They're going in.
So,
yeah.
You can see, my team actually probably overcommitted, but they used literally everything. So we used our trinkets, but my healer used the cocoon on me. And then if you can go ahead and play from here, basically what we say is, and what you should do against these double caster comps is you have to just deny them. We just say,
you know what? Yeah.
We're just gonna wait. So we wait. We just literally line of sight. I'm not even trying to spam purge. We're not trying to use anything.
Yeah.
And even in the comms, we're saying, well, we didn't use anything. We're good to go. This team is used to one-shotting people, and it's if you don't respect those cooldowns. So here, what we're going to be doing is we're going to try to hit the closest caster, and you can see here my health kind of starts to drop.
You're going to be the target. Everybody's going to go for the Enhancement Shaman first, right?
Yes. Yeah, but of course, and this is where I'm trying to communicate with my healer, who has to deal with getting feared, has to deal with getting polymorphed, and I have to communicate very closely with him to say, hey, how much healing do I have? Does he need to be worried? Does he need to use a cooldown? Do I need to use a cooldown? And largely, I basically can have up to 2 instant cast heals, and you'll see when I use them, they're huge. It's a very some people think it's overpowered, but it's pretty important.
It is shocking, like no shaman pun intended, like how much healing you can actually do as enhancement with those Maelstrom powered heals.
Yeah, and even there, I cast one. It was pretty good. So you can see here, I'm just denying them at this point. So this is something else I think people have to, especially as Enhancement Shaman, understand, is that we don't have to just run in their Mongoloid, right?
Right.
We can respect their cooldowns, or if my healer's in a crowd control and we're close to a pillar, I can just hide for 5 seconds. It's in usually those 5 seconds that teams are scoring kills, so I can respect that. So here again, I'm kind of running and hiding, or I'm kind of playing very kind of defensive.
And you're really good at that too, because you've got stuff like Ghost Wolf as well to get away a little quicker.
Yep. So I can ground, I can interrupt, I can self heal. And all the while, they haven't even looked at my warrior. My warrior has been just going to town on them. And he alone can force a ton of pressure. Right. He has a very strong defensive toolkit as well, so I'm not really too worried about him. So all we have to really worry about is me and the healer coordinating when are we using our cooldowns. So here again, they use combustion, they use Dark Soul, and they're trying to all in us. And as soon as you start to break down games to just cooldown use and where and respecting those, the games start to become a lot simpler, because and maybe that's just for melees, but if they don't have cooldowns, we can go to town. There should be zero risk of us dying in those situations right now, because they use both of their big cooldowns, and we can start to put as much pressure as possible. Even using a non-meta healer, you can see the mana bars of my Mistweaver is about the equivalent of an Holy Paladin, which is a superior healer right now. But it is what it is.
Objectively, yeah.
Yeah, so and that's okay, and we're trying to kind of make it work. But again, so what you're going to see here is I am going to get very nervous, and this is where, if I did not respect cooldowns, if I did not, like I said, understand that I don't have to be out here, then we probably would have lost the game. So here again, you can see they're starting to pop cooldowns. They get in my healer and crowd control, and I just say to my healer, and I say, I'm not going to go anywhere. I don't have to go out there, and I can kind of, I can self-heal myself as much as I want, but really it's the cooldowns that we have to be scared of. So here we're trying to get some offensive pressure, but I'm always staying kind of orbit of that.
You can always get there fast, just like you got into that warlock right there. And that was it. Like, so the thing is you talk about them having to respect, or you having to respect their damage a lot, but they also have to respect your damage a lot too. The burst from Enhancement Shaman is pretty crazy. All right, so it's kind of like we were saying, like you have to respect the Enhancement Shaman's damage as well. And do you find, do you think this is maybe a little bit of a tougher question, but in all honesty, Do you think a lot of the wins you get are from people just being sort of inexperienced with playing against Enhancement Shamans? Or is it really that Enhancement Shaman has a strength that people aren't, respecting right now? That it is a better class than people give it credit for?
Yeah, I think Enhancement Shaman is on the rise, and I think people are starting to realize that they do bring a lot of power. I do think that not many people are experienced going against them, and I really do believe that because a lot of people don't know how to counter an Enhancement Shaman's burst. If people do know, it can really shut them down. And because our burst is all around our use of Doom Winds, which is our legendary that when we drop it, it puts us on a 1 minute debuff and makes all of our hits proc Wind Fury, which is just an additional damage.
Yeah.
So what happens is if people know how to counter that, they can deny us a lot of our momentum. And not only is it frustrating, it makes it so your pressure is definitely, not able to be put out as much. A lot of people can tell when I go into Ascendance form, which is a 3 minute cooldown. They know that a big damage is coming, and they'll try to, CC me through that. So what I usually try to do, for better or worse, is I'll try to save that cooldown till I know that there's a window of time that I can get 15 seconds of value out of it, because they will CC you. Like that Mage Warlock team could have, spam CC'd me at the end there, maybe if they saw that I went into Ascendance, they know, big damage is coming. But generally, yeah, I think that Enhancement Shaman is now starting to get recognized a bit more. As it's later in the season, I think the game's slowing down a little bit. I think people understand how fast things can go, with some classes having one-shot capabilities like Combustion, Fire Mage, Convoke Druid, Ret Paladin, Divine Toll. People have gotten one-shot enough that they know what it's coming, so it actually makes Enhancement Shaman and all hybrids really, I think, more valuable.
This is a big thing you bring up, the one-shots as well, because Enhancement Shaman's major defensive cooldown, Astral Shift, you can't use it if the CC is already starting to happen, all that. You have to use it preemptively. And I think that's one of the things that, and I'm not a great Arena player, obviously, but that's one of the things I've struggled with the most getting back into Arena and playing Enhancement Shaman, is like knowing when to use Astral Shift, kind of like knowing when the damage is going to be incoming. If you can do that, fine, you're taking 40% less damage. Great. If you can't, you're just dead, right? So
yeah, it's a good point. And I actually think that brings up probably the most important kind of aspect of Arena that I don't think that most people really kind of plan for, which is the use of the Gladiator's Medallion, the trinket out of CC. A lot of times I'll play with, LFG, looking for group people, or just finding random, people to play with. And a lot of times people won't plan ahead. Who's going to use their trinket first out of the crowd control? Who's going to do it second? Who's going to do it third? And what do you have to do? And I think that is one skill and one kind of planning ahead step that if you get that down, it no longer becomes a kind of a passionate experience. It starts to become a calculated one. And that's where you heard me say earlier, like, we only die to these things. We can only lose if this. So if you make sure those scenarios never occur, like, for example, a great way that most people, I bet, under 2,400 lose games is because their healer has no trinket and they have no trinket. I guarantee 50% of the losses are because of that. Because usually there's something that you could do, but you're in a stun, or your healer's in a crowd control. If you spread those things out to figure out who's going to save the day, that is the number one thing I think that people could benefit from, kind of planning out. And that's not even a class specific thing, but Shaman is a great example of that. If I don't have a trinket and my healer doesn't have a trinket, I could have all the heals in the world. I could have all the defensives in the world. I don't have an immunity, unfortunately, but if they stun me, they CC my healer, we lose. It's just that simple. Yep. So we have to make sure one of us can alternate back and forth. So it can be pretty frustrating when you realize that after the game, but yeah.
I think that's one of the steepest learning curves going into Arena is learning how to coordinate trinkets with your teammates. But we've got one more game to watch here. Are you ready to get in game 3? This is the longest one too, so I'm excited about this one.
Yep. I'm excited too.
All right, let's do it. All right, here we go. Going to Bastion, game number 3. It's Resto Druid, Shadow Priest, Affliction Warlock. And you are all amped up on your energy drink. You're ready to go. What are you thinking coming into this one?
This is yeah, one of the reasons why I wanted to call this out is, again, this has two factors here. Number one, this is against shadow play, which is
Yep.
it is the most annoying comp to go against. Well, it could get a little bit worse if there was a frost mage on their team along with the affliction, but we'll ignore that. But this team, because of the warlock legendary, it actually just slows you by 50% the entire time. So I'm playing a melee comp. We're trying to keep momentum. We're trying to stay on the target. How do we do that if we're slowed 50% of the time? And so we went against this team actually a bunch of times, and we tried different strategies. And what we found was that it depends on what happens. You'll see us at the beginning here. We're trying to hit the closest target to our healer. We're trying to get momentum and try to the druid. We think that we can go through his mana pool, even though we're playing with a Mistweaver. So what you'll see is they're quickly trying to keep us at range. And you'll see the entire game, they will be so spread out. And it is so frustrating for us because we don't have any mobility. Yeah. We can't really get there. And you can see we do a stun, we do a big go here, and he just uses fade to survive. And so now we're trying to switch targets. You'll see us switching targets a lot, and it's mainly because we're going against a Resto Druid, where Resto Druid has HOTS that they put onto a target that cost mana. Yeah. When they do that, if we just ignore that, switch to the other target, then they have to re-hot that.
So here's a question about for Resto Druids, because obviously Shaman can purge. You can get rid of those HOTS, but there's so many of them that I feel like sometimes you just spend all your time purging, and that can't be right either. So how do you approach the Resto Druid matchup?
Great question. And it's actually one where people will say, because in previous X-Packs and previous games, people would say, just purge nonstop. The problem is
I remember that.
If you're an Enhancement Shaman now, because of the way that you're set up, if you purge, each purge is 10% of your mana.
Yeah.
Okay. And each heal is about 25% of your mana. So the problem is that if you purge one hot off, if you purge 2.5 HOTS off of a target, they're not going to die. It's not going to cost that much mana. And the problem is that much purging will set you back one heal. That heal could save you because it heals you for about 30% of your health. Right. So that is something that you have to kind of, it's a give or take. Are you going to start purging or not? And really the answer is don't, because usually you can burst through those HOTS if necessary, if there's no other cooldowns there. And frankly, you need your healing to save yourself or your teammates even more. So it's definitely a shift. It would be different if I was Ellie and I didn't have instant cast huge heals. But yeah, in this situation, we're just kind of focusing on whatever target is the closest, whichever one we can hit, and then just kind of getting stuns and burst goes on them over and over. And you can see,
because it seems like you're getting about you're getting them down to like 50% pretty consistently if we're talking about the priest and the warlock, but you're just mostly trying to switch targets and keep the healer on their toes and hit whoever's closest. Right?
Yep. And here, they have the warlock gateway, so every time we go them, they can use maybe a small defensive and then gateway. Or if we go the warlock, he can gateway and he can portal. So here, you're going to kind of see us kind of going out whatever we can, but ideally we should be hitting the same target together. And that's because the warrior has his mortal strike, reducing healing effectiveness by 25%. We can stun, we can do a lot of damage there. So we really want to hit the same target, but in this game, we're about like at 70% HP the whole game.
Yeah,
and that's partially because Affliction Warlock has unstable affliction, and you can't dispel that without getting hugely punished. So we're actually having to, we're having to sit a lot of the dots. You can see my healer dropping really low,
extremely
low.
And
I just start sending some heals on him, and he says, "Oh, I'm fine." So I say, "Okay, I'm out of here." So it's kind of just. Yeah, and we're on par with mana levels, and we're kind of keeping track of that because this is a situation where if they don't have burst, if they don't have big damage, maybe my healer could go for a drink potentially. We haven't talked about that, but that's one thing with a Mistweaver. We sometimes had to be like, okay, Tiqqle, do you have all the healing physically possible? Yes. Okay, I'll try to go run away and try to take a sip. But in this game, really, it's a lot of switching targets over and over and over, and my Mistweaver stopping the Druid from drinking. Druids are notorious for stealthing away, hiding off in the corner and getting drinks. And so for us, though, our goal was whenever he does that, we have to go even harder. We have to pressure him out and start making sure that he does a lot of healing. So here,
you feel like
you're seeing us.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, you see us waddling, and we're just like, so sad.
Do you feel like against this comp, it's a lot of patience? You have to kind of wait for them to make a mistake, almost.
Yeah, it's a good point. You have to have the endurance to kind of stay with it and keep going and not get tilted and be just aware of the things that will kill you. And in this situation, the only thing that will kill us quickly is mind games from the priest, which makes any of my healing do damage to me. So that's the only time that they could CC my healer and they can mind games me, and we are we're in deep trouble. You all saw my health just get low a few seconds ago. That was because of that. And so that's really the only scenario that we're scared. Otherwise, it's our job to out pressure them. And you can even see on the damage meters that Warlock, even though he is like, just dashing around the map, he's still doing a ton of damage.
Hey, it's the power of dots, man.
The power of dots it's actually crazy. Now, the only good thing to note is that as a Mistweaver, my friend has these. He has an honor talent that lets him put little orbs on the ground. You can see me picking them up there.
Right.
They will actually dispel me, and they won't destroy his health pool at the same time. So that is kind of nice, but really here it's really a pressure game. And so us waddling around the map, really we want to be doing our burst damage during stuns. We want to be making sure we're stopping the mind games and just putting as much pressure as possible.
Well, so here's a question for you too. When you have an enemy team that's so spread out like this, how do you decide when to use Ascendance? Because obviously that gives you extra range for your attacks as Enhancement Shaman. But if it's a long cooldown, it's a strong cooldown, but it's a long one. So how do you approach that?
Yeah, so really how I should be using it anytime I think I'll be able to utilize the majority of its duration, right? So in this case, at the beginning of the game, there was people porting around, all that stuff. It's not a good time. I really want to use it into a stun where they don't have a trinket or they don't have like a big defensive cooldown. Because if I was them, if I saw Ascendant Storm running at me, I would pop my big defensive cooldown and just negate the value. So usually we try to bait it out and then pop it when either they're in a bad position. Like, for example, this S-Priest right now is in a pretty good spot to burst because he's not near the portal, even the healer at this point in time. So those are really the times that I like to pop it. But I just popped it right here actually, and maybe that's because my warrior's going to be stunning soon. He just got it up, so we're able to get a lot of pressure here. But we can see the healer responds with Iron Bark. So it's actually it's tough. And a lot of times when I pop Ascendance, I'll switch targets. We got Iron Bark on the S-Priest, and then all of a sudden we go on the Druid. I want to maximize the value as much as I can while it's up, because it is 15 seconds, but it's like you said, 3 minutes, which is longest cooldown.
Approaching this comp, it's kind of a matter of doing damage to simply whoever you can do damage to at the point, and then by doing that, just try your hardest to drain the mana of the other team. Yeah,
and ideally, what we'll see as the teams get more desperate is they will have to go for a drink. The Druid is trying, right now even is stealthing, trying to get a drink. This is really our time to shine, to start to get a lot of pressure going. And you can see the Warlocks doing massive damage. And often people will pop offensive cooldowns to allow their healers to go drink. Right. That's a kind of a counter to kind of defend them, to try to scare off the other team. And here you can see our health pools are starting to dip. But again, we have to kind of just, as you mentioned, kind of stay true to our goal of just kind of getting our pump on as much as we can. Our Mistweaver's low mana, their healer's low mana, and unfortunately, it really depends on the team and how mobile they can be. Like, for example, an S-Priest doesn't have mobility. They're a great target, and you've seen us mostly hit him. But a Warlock, if they're really good at kiting, you'll never touch them. And that's why we don't even go on him, even though he's top damage. It's just not that useful.
It seems like whenever he strays near you, that's when you throw a couple hits on him, basically.
Yeah, and we can even see his, he's used his 3 minute, even the Warlocks use his 3 minute defensive cooldown, but we can't really connect on him, so we have to just hit what we can. And even right now, he's really the best target for us to hit, but if we can't stick on him, we're not getting any pressure. And at this point, we're trying to get the rest of the mana out of that Druid. And you can see, the S-Priest is getting low, even though the S-Priest has some defensive cooldowns. And so here we're going to make a swap, a hard swap, because Thorns was used on the S-Priest. That's going to reflect a lot of damage. We get even his dispersion out. And so, we want to keep our momentum just as and here we finally connect. He doesn't have trinket, so he couldn't port away, and we finally get him. And you can see where the Druid is actually. The Druid is actually across the map. So it was actually a perfect time to make that switch, because he was so desperate to get out of range. And I kind
of did notice too that Warlock getting a little bit complacent, letting himself get a little bit close to the melee classes, to you and the Warrior.
Yeah. It definitely, and it's just, in the meta right now, it's just so fast that even at that one stun opportunity, you can kind of shut everything down. So
All right. So exactly like you're saying, it really is a patience game a lot of times, and I find it so admirable to see Enhancement Shamans playing at that level, because you do feel so squishy when you're in arena as Enhancement Shaman, that when you're playing that patient game, I feel like you really need to be at like peak levels of attention to what's going on, because you know, let it slip for 1 second and you're just so easy to burst down.
Yeah, in the meta right now, it is so fast paced that there are times where we've lost games and we'll look back and we'll say, what could I have done in 0.7 seconds? And we actually are thinking that.
Well, that's what it is. That's WoW Arena, yeah.
It's actually, and this hasn't happened as much in like BFA. That was kind of a slower progression of like, you knew the doom was coming. Here it's just split second. It's so fast. And what we're seeing, even as kind of we're climbing on the ladder, is that we're seeing certain comps actually, their whole goal is to get you in 1 second of vulnerability, and that's it. That's it. So it's definitely an interesting time in WoW PvP, especially as fast paced as it is. So Enhancement Shaman though is at a great place. I have to say, I'm really happy that people are kind of gravitating to the class now more than I thought before. I'm seeing more Enhancement Shamans like just queuing into them, or just like kind of saying, hey, like I'm hitting new achievements that I haven't hit before, and I'm like, that's awesome. And I do think that it's because of the class rework, and because you know, of people doing well and kind of showing that like Turbo's back and like certain other comps are back. So I think it's really exciting time to be enhanced for sure.
Awesome. All right, I know I'm inspired for it as well. I want to, before we end this, I want to quickly go over some of the things that go into sort of like building an Enhancement Shaman for PvP. So let's quickly go over just some of the talents that you think are very crucial. We don't have to go tier by tier, but what are some of the first regular base talents and then PvP talents that are kind of essential for arena and sort of the roles they fill?
Yeah, good question. So the number one thing right now for Enhancement Shaman to do burst damage is to have the first few talents are Forceful Winds, which increases your Wind Fury damage, and to have Storm Flurry. These things will increase the amount of damage your Storm Strikes, which is your main damaging ability, will do. But it also synergizes with the legendary, which is called Doom Winds. Doom Winds, it's every time you pop that Wind Fury totem, it gives you 12 seconds of anything that has a chance to proc Wind Fury will proc Wind Fury. So those, you know, you can like Storm Strike procs it. So Storm Flurry, which makes your Storm Strikes potentially hit twice or 3 times. And then Forceful Winds increasing that Wind Strike, Wind Fury damage is all kind of compounding. And that's really where you're getting the burst out of Enhance. Which
and you're using the Unruly Winds conduit, of course, too, right?
Yeah, so Unruly Winds giving you... Yeah, and that's actually, it's pretty cool that Blizzard did this. I think that they made Wind Fury such a kind of a high percentage of our damage, because it's kind of a nod back to the olden days.
It really does. Classic. Like, as someone who played Enhancement Shaman all the way back to vanilla, like I struggle to remember a time in the last 5 to 10 years, honestly, where Enhancement Shaman felt this much like what I remember from the early days of WoW.
Yeah, it's not exactly what it was, right? There's no two-handed.
Yeah. You know, don't even get me started on that, man. Like, all right. I miss my two-handers.
All I'm saying is this: Blizzard said at BlizzCon they did say they're open to suggestions about honor talents.
All right.
Two-handed mastery.
All right. You know, but, just let us just put both enchantments on the same weapon if we're running a two-hander. Why not? What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
Nothing's wrong with that.
Simple solution.
Exactly.
Yeah, easy. Yeah. But so Unruly Winds, the conduit is critical. And then the other talents that I would say are the biggest deal are Ascendance and Sundering. And the reason for that is Sundering has a chance to proc Wind Fury. So during your Doom Winds burst, again, you can Sunder, and that will proc the Wind Fury on the target. It also is an interrupt. It also it's not on stun, diminishing return. So if my warrior storm bolts for 3 seconds and then I Sunder, that's another 2 seconds of stun. And then Ascendance, as we talked earlier, a 3-minute cooldown that gives your abilities range. And you can actually, especially in a Doom Winds window, you can get kills at range as an Enhanced Shaman, just chucking your your wind at them.
And people don't expect it. They're far away from you. They're like, oh, I'm far away from this melee class. And then suddenly they're taking all this damage. And, you know, sometimes it takes them a while to figure out where that's coming from. If they're the bad players at my level anyway. Probably not at your level. Yeah.
Oh no, it's shocking sometimes when you get a lot of procs on procs it just gets annihilated. But the other thing is, as you mentioned on early wins in the conduit, for the Covenant, it's really kind of, the system is what it is. There's the best, and in this case it is significant, which is Venthyr. So Chain Harvest is, it can be pretty nuts. People it can crit for upwards of 20k, and which is just crazy. But
and the healing too.
Yes, and the healing is actually a really big deal. So that's something like in the last game, every time I'm pressing it, we're getting topped. We're getting value out of the heal, which is huge. So that's the Covenant, the go-to Covenant. I like to go the defensive tree, which is the General Draven tree, which has I forget what it's called, but it's the first one where you take 10% less damage under 40% health. Yeah, but so kind of going more tanky, which is kind of we need it.
We do need it. That's true.
We need it. Yeah. So so I'd say that's pretty much the build, along with Doomwind's, as the legendary for now. I think next patch we might see some variety in legendaries that could be used, more hybrid nature cast, with Elemental Blast stuff. But that's basically the build for now that people are rocking and rolling. So
cool. All right, and then PvP talents, as far as those go, what do you find yourself rolling with more often than not?
So Grounding Totem is almost
naturally
required no matter what. And the reason for that is, even if there's very few cases where you don't want it. And even if you might say, well, we're going against a druid, that one cyclone that he might cast, that could be the game deciding one. And if you have an answer for that in that situation, maybe that could be a win. But the most important thing that grounding is important for, two things. Number one is combustion. Off of a fire mage. When a fire mage pops combustion, my immediate reaction is to use my trinket, use Grounding Totem. And the fact is, people are trying to kill you in 1 second. If you take that 1 second away and have it all soaked by the Grounding Totem, you've negated that cooldown. So that's a huge deal. And then the other one is stopping mind games. Mind games is the killer of Shaman. It is what I mentioned earlier. Any healing you do will then do damage. So you can actually just explode yourself with healing. And so that's out of any priest. So any priest, you need to be running grounding. So that's the biggest one. And then I run a shamanism, which allows me to bloodlust my teammate. That's huge, especially into turbo or pretty much any melee cleave comp with an enhance. And then I also have been running swelling waves, which just it adds 50% of my healing surge as an additional heal 3 seconds later. Now I'm using that one. I would ride the lightning. I like more, but the problem is when you play with a Mistweaver, he will use, he has Incap, he has Song of, I forget what, Song of whatever. He has certain CCs that if you do any damage to them, it'll break. And Ride the Lightning is notorious for breaking every crowd control in the world. It doesn't care if they're CC'd. It's not a smart damaging. It's every time you Storm Strike, it shoots lightning bolts off on the other two targets. So it's not good for our comp for now. But one of those two is kind of the third one that I would recommend.
And again, we need all the defensive healing stuff we can. That's true. That's true. Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
that's, absolutely.
I think that's a good breakdown of kind of the basics as far as talents that go into playing Enhancement Shaman in Arena, and I think that that about does it. Thanks so much for coming on to the show. This has been so much fun. I've played World of Warcraft for so many years. I've been, more and less involved in Arena based on the expansion, sometimes more, sometimes less, but I'm getting more into it again recently, so I want to start doing shows and get into the minds of some of the best players, of some of the specs, and of course I had to start with my favorite spec in the game. Why wouldn't I? So thanks for coming on the show. I hope you had fun. Do you have any final thoughts, shout outs before we end this?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is that I think that the next patch will hopefully shake things up in the PvP scene. I know some people at this point are so, the meta's been defined. We know what's best, we know what's worst, we know certain things, but they are changing things up for 905. I don't know when it's coming out yet, but that should be a pretty good, it should be a pretty good point to jump back in and to try some new things out. Potentially Covenant change-ups, potentially Legendary change-ups, specifically for Enhance. I'm still waiting to see clips of Night Fae Enhancement Shamans. I know they're going to exist. At some point in time. But yeah, so we'll see what happens. But no, I appreciate you inviting me and reviewing some clips. Hopefully, it gives people some insight into kind of the speed and some of the offensive and defensive and certain control things that Enhancement Shaman have to deal with in arena. So
yeah,
appreciate it.
At the end of the day, Enhancement Shaman is just one of the most fun classes to play in World of Warcraft. It always has been. We've never been the top of the meters. We've never been the best DPS spec, but who cares? It's fun, and it's better than you think. So, Tiqqle, thanks for joining us. That's going to do it for this episode of Galaxy Brain. I'll be back with another WoW one at some point with some other class. We'll figure it out. Until then, thanks for watching, and game on.